Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Hope everyone's doing well. We'll get started in just a moment. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. We'll start in just a moment. Good morning. If you have any questions, please add them to the chat and we'll get to them. Good morning, Sunnyvale. Happy Friday. Welcome to my weekly virtual office hours. I'm still catching up with all the emails and phone calls since the spring break vacation, but it's been a busy week or two since I've gotten back. But this week's artwork is actually from another one from my travels. This is actually artwork on the side of a brick building in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And I was actually pretty impressed about the design. Very colorful, very and actually I was actually impressed with Cedar Rapids. Lots of artwork. There's an art institute in Cedar Rapids, and art throughout the city, whether or not that was sculptures or murals or like a multitude of different things. So happy to kind of share some of the things that I saw during the travels. But it was really an amazing trip, and I always focused on trying to see some of the art and get some ideas on what we'd like to do here in Sunnyvale. So that's always a fantastic thing, of course. Let me go ahead and switch my background, and then we can get started. There we go. Good morning. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein. Thank you for joining me again this week. We continue to have longer days as we're entering closer and closer to summer. This is the 159th installment of my weekly office hours. Weekly virtual office hours. I hope everyone's doing well, staying healthy. We've now reached 1,152 days since the county health order started the shelter in place in an attempt to slow the spread of COVID-19. Over the last 3 years, I've converted my weekly coffee shop office hours into this weekly live stream address. And except for surgery and a spring break vacation, I hadn't missed a week. But thanks for everyone who continues to join me and wants to hear from their mayor each week, whether or not they're watching this live or whether or not they're watching it video delayed. People still say they appreciate, hearing from their mayor. And these updates allow me to provide you some info on upcoming events, provide you some updates of what's happening in the city, answer some of your questions, and just give you some general words of encouragement. So thank you for allowing me to continue to represent you and work for Sunnyvale. Most Fridays, just like this morning, I follow up this live stream session with in-person meetings at Being Seen on Murphy Avenue. And so if you'd like to reserve 15-minute or 30-minute time slot, just email me and we can figure out a time frame. So just email me at council@larryklein.com. and we'll figure out when best to meet. So let's go ahead and get started and talk about what's happened at the federal, state, county, and city level over the last 2 weeks. So last Tuesday, council met at City Hall, and so we're still not in our council chambers, still some things to deal with as far as that's concerned, but getting closer. Things are rapidly being fixed in the new chambers. But we started the meeting off with several special orders of the day, one for Affordable Housing Month, and we had the development crew from Related, which is the new 90-unit affordable housing that's on city land right at Iowa, Matilda, and Charles Avenue. And so they came and spoke to us, and we honored them for Affordable Housing Month. We had a recognition for Public Service Recognition Week and Public Works Week. It was basically honoring our employees. We have a fantastic group of employees that work at the city. And then, of course, our Public Works Week, thanking those, park workers and road workers, infrastructure workers that make sure, our roads are paved, our parks are in fantastic condition. So it was good to honor them. And then we also honored Municipal Clerks Week, which was last week. Our city clerks have done a fantastic job, especially during COVID, on running our meetings and making sure that we're meeting the ever-changing rules. But it was actually really good from that standpoint to thank our city clerk's office and for all the good that they do in our community. And then we had a presentation from Valley Water regarding the proposed rate increases for the upcoming year. And their Valley Water director, Richard Santos, was there, and multiple of their staff was there. And over the last few years, they increased the Valley Water rate increases for the next 20 years was supposed to be 9%, and then it was 9.9%. And what they're planning to do this year is for the next 2 years, go to a 14.5% increase. It was 15. They said they're going to use some of the reserves and bring that down to 14.5. What Sunnyvale does is a pass through for all the water rates and the sewage rates and the garbage rates are all based upon cost of doing business. It's not like we're making money on those services. And so especially for water, we get our water from the SFPUC and Valley Water. And so when they're raising their rates, we, especially increasing their rates over what they had expected, we end up having to sometimes we can buffer that a little with reserves like we did last year, but we can't keep doing that because we only had a certain number of reserves. So I pushed back quite a bit. We'll see whether or not what happens as far as that's concerned from Valley Water standpoint. But the South County, there's two things with the South County. They pay a lower rate than the rest of the county from a water standpoint, which I understand they have more agriculture there, but that being said, making that more equitable across the county makes more sense. And then also they deal with a lot of unmetered water, meaning that they pull water from the ground and they estimate how much water they bring in or how much water they utilize. And they're audited to some degree, but that to me doesn't, the lower rates as well as being unmetered doesn't really encourage them to save water. And so, hopefully, and this is one of the things I ask Valley Water is like, look closely at the South County rates, look closely at, what you're doing there, because it's not fair from across the county standpoint when the North County pays the majority of the burden for the upcoming infrastructure changes. And, this is an ongoing equity issue that we'll see what Valley Water says. But yeah, you can go through and take a look at that presentation if you get a chance. And then as far as general business, we had our annual assessment for the downtown Sunnyvale Business Improvement District. So this is what we charge businesses downtown, and that goes into a business improvement district fund, which is then utilized to make sure that the streets are cleaned and helps fund the downtown association's events that bring everybody downtown. So good to see that. We approved from the main meeting, we approved the draft 2023 Housing and Urban Development Action Plan. And from a HUD standpoint, we give CDBG and HUD money to different projects, and this is a mixture of service organizations like Sunnyvale Community Services for them to provide food, or their Work First program, where they work with Downtown Streets team to help some of the unhoused get jobs or get into that frequency of working. It's improving our community that way, as well as some of the funds are utilized to do improvements for low income house owners, or ultimately refurbishing some of the affordable housing projects that we have within the city. So it was good from that standpoint. Good to see what some of the projects, and there's never enough money, but that's one of the good sources of that we were able to utilize every year. And then we got our annual report on the public safety military equipment use, that because there's an assembly bill that was approved a few years ago, Assembly Bill 481, which says that every city needs to update that on a yearly basis. And so that was our annual report on what our SWAT teams have in case of emergency, and hearing some of those reports on how we're utilizing that equipment. So it's good to see our public safety department give some of those updates. And in general, I think there was a meeting on Wednesday where they're doing outreach and hearing from the public as far as that's concerned. And then last Thursday was May the 4th. So Star Wars Day, and actually a big event at Sunnyvale Public Library pretty much every year. And so thanks for friends of the Sunnyvale Public Library who make a difference and fund a lot of those fun events that are happening. So that was actually good. And then as far as this week, Monday and Tuesday, we had 2 long evenings of interviews for our board and commission applicants. And Monday went from 5 p.m. to about 10:30 p.m. and Tuesday went from 4 p.m. to about 10 p.m. But this year we had about 36 total applicants. And we on a quarterly basis we do interviews for our open positions, and but the mid-year one is always big because we have people whose terms are ended, so a lot more open positions, or people that are re-upping for a second 4-year term. And then of course this year we had the new Human Relations Commission, and we had about 18 applicants that were interested in our new Human Relations Commission. So good evening, good to meet some new people, and good to see so many people that want to give back to our community. And then on Tuesday morning, we had a topping off ceremony for City Line's mixed use development. And so this was the 2 office buildings that are along Washington. So it's fantastic to see the long-term vision of Sunnyvale downtown slowly coming to fruition. I got involved with the city 20 years ago, and it was mainly because of what was happening downtown and what would replace the new mall. So that beam ceremony, and so the developers, the development team, the contractors, the Sunnyvale staff and council signed the beam that was going into that 7-story office building along Washington Avenue. So that's one of the last of that framing. And it's actually pretty amazing that only 18 months ago we were doing the groundbreaking for that same location. So they dug out 2 levels of underground parking for the apartments and the office space and the retail. And then they've already finished the framing for the office space retail buildings. And now they still have a little bit left on the apartment building with the retail on the bottom. But it's just amazing to see how quickly that's moved forward, even under COVID, and happy that we're slowly, by sometime next year, all that should be moving forward and open. So, they'll be closing that up quickly once they finish the framing, and then they start doing all the interior work. So happy to see that going forward. And then on Wednesday, the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Department had its annual Peace Officers Memorial Ceremony. And this is honoring, peace officers who made, the ultimate sacrifice while serving their community. So Sheriff Johnson led the event. There were bagpipes playing Amazing Grace as normal. And, a riderless horse honoring the fallen. And officers from around the county, elected officials were there, and families gathered to honor, our fallen officers that gave their lives for our community. We've had, from a Sunnyvale standpoint, we've had 5 officers die in the line of duty since the city was founded. I think the first one was in 1962, and I think the last one was in 1980s. Last one was in the 1980s. And, it's always an honor to meet those families and, see them every year as they come back to honor, one of their family members who gave their life for our city. So, it was good to see them again. And we had our own private ceremony last year when the sheriff didn't have an in-person ceremony. So it was good to honor those across the county from that standpoint. And then as of yesterday, of course, COVID-19 is no longer considered a public health emergency in the United States. So, last month, President Biden had signed legislation that would put an end to the emergency classification for COVID as May 11th. And so that end of COVID-19 emergency status follows nearly a week after the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 no longer a health emergency on a global scale. And, of course, while it's no longer a emergency, there's still lots of people catching COVID. I heard of someone earlier this week that caught COVID. So, it's still out there. It's still part of our community. But it's more logistics are changing. It's like, with COVID-19 no longer considered a COVID health emergency, case surveillance, health insurance policies, how that liability and how that's being paid for is modified quite a bit. And as well as there's some changes to travel. It's like President Biden on Tuesday revoked requirements that most international visitors to the U.S. No longer have to be vaccinated against COVID-19, and as well as removing some similar rules for federal employees and contractors. So those rules take effect today with the expiration, of that COVID-19 health emergency. So, the rules were imposed in September 2021. So, that was when, only those people that were vaccinated could come into the US. And then as far as the federal employees, about 3.5 million federal employees and contractors were required to be vaccinated, or they faced firing or disciplinary action. So, all that has come to pass. And, we're in a brave new world, although, still be safe, still, I still mask up when I'm inside of, department stores and things of that nature. So it's always good to be safe, especially if you hear somebody coughing or anything of that nature. But I think that's the big thing, in being safe when you're traveling in airplanes and all that. And then last night, of course, there was the Unity event, the bystander training at Columbia Neighborhood Center. And, I wasn't able to attend. I was actually in another meeting from 5:30 p.m. to about 9:30 p.m. but I heard it went very well. And, it's was Zoom or in person. So I think that the general meeting will be put online sometime soon, but it was giving residents the 5 strategies for intervention. So how to distract, delegate, document, delay, or redirect. And, and prioritizing your own safety when you're intervening. And I know we're thinking about having more bystander training classes in the future. So if you miss this one, definitely keep, I'll update you later on when another one might be available. And then today, Governor Newsom is expected to announce an update to his budget, and it's expected to even be a bigger budget deficit than the 22 billion deficit that was announced in January. So we'll see how that affects, state budget plans and programs and all that, what the state legislature is going to be doing from that standpoint. So I'm sure he'll be top of the news later today or tomorrow. And then as far as COVID, as I said previously, I won't be covering the weekly COVID numbers anymore, unless things change dramatically, which it doesn't look like they're doing. But, I still do lots of advocating on our city's behalf at the county level, at the state and federal level. And then, of course, with lots of our partners dealing with, city issues and trying to make sure that things go smoothly. Let me go ahead and announce some of the upcoming events. So May is Bike to Work Month. So please pledge to ride. Bike to Everywhere is next Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So May 18th through the 20th. And, sign to pledge to ride. You can win prizes, and it's just good to get out on your bike, to figure out, that it is a very, very good alternate way to travel around the city or even beyond. But fantastic, always fantastic to be part of Bike to Everywhere event. And so there will be Energizer stations that Thursday, Friday, and Saturday around the county, actually in all the counties in the Bay Area. So if you can get out, get a snack, get a food bag. It's actually always a lot of fun. So see me. Hopefully, you'll see me out there on the bike next week, and then tomorrow is the 38th annual Hands on the Arts Festival, and so it's a multicultural art event. So there'll be 20 hands-on art or dance workshops for children, and then age 2+. There'll be a main stage with diverse performance groups and entertainers. There'll be cultural community groups. There'll be a puppet stage and roving performers. And of course, food to purchase, and that kind of reflects the diversity of our city from a food standpoint. So the event is free for everyone. And there actually a bike parade. So if you want to get out on your bike, there'll be a bike parade from the Sunnyvale Public Library to the community center starting around 9:30. And then you also get priority check-in for the bike valet. So you basically turn in your bike and get a ticket so that you can actually safely store your bike while you're attending the festival. So hopefully you'll be able to join that. Should be a lot of fun. And then downtown tomorrow is Taste of the World, and so that event promotes the diversity of Sunnyvale, spotlighting downtown restaurants and bringing together the love of wine. So it'll be so you can buy tickets at multiple locations. You can go to the Downtown Association's website online to buy them ahead of time, but you can stroll around downtown and enjoy kind of different cuisines paired with wine. So that's happening downtown in the afternoon, I think from 3 o'clock to 5:30 or 2:30 to 5:30. So definitely join that fun downtown tomorrow. Sunday, of course, is Mother's Day, so please honor the mothers in your life. Lots of restaurants are having, special events this weekend. So take a look at some of your mom's favorite restaurants as far as that's concerned. But definitely thanks to all the mothers that make a difference in the world. And then next Thursday is a Tip a Cop event at the Agape Grill at Stewart Avenue for lunch. And so this helps raise funds for the Northern California Special Olympics. And so come and attend that. But that's at the Agape Grill right near Lowe's, if you know where that is, kind of hidden away on Stewart. But really good Greek Mediterranean food if you've not been there. And so definitely come, meet some of our public safety officers and support Special Olympics, which is always a good cause. And then the following Saturday, May 20th, is National River Cleanup Day. You can prevent pollution in the bay by helping, clean some of the items that are spread in our creeks. And those cleanups are happening around Santa Clara County. So all you need to do is I posted about it earlier this week, but basically, go to a link and register. I think Sunnyvale Environmental Services also posted, so that's always good. And then that same morning from 9:30 to 11:30, there's a town hall at the Columbia Neighborhood Center. And this is something that I've been pushing for a while, but it's bringing Fremont Union High School District leaders and VTA together. And we've had lots of discussions over the last 3 or 4 months on basically the equity issues of our high school students that are going to Fremont High School and Homestead High School. The Sunnyvale High School was closed back in 1981. And for a few years, they ran buses, and then ultimately VTA took that over. But I've heard complaints about buses being late or too full, and and as far as the frequency, not those students not being able to do after school events. And so trying to figure out ways to improve that and hear from the students, hear from the parents, what we can do. It's mainly, it's a VTA frequency issue to a certain degree, and it's making sure that all the students have passes. All the students who want them have passes to ride that bus line as much as possible. So, and there's ongoing discussions at the school board about whether or not we would like to conceivably reopen, figure out a new location for King's Academy and reopen the old Sunnyvale High School, especially as we add, more and more housing into Sunnyvale. And we see the populations among the 5 high schools in the Fremont Union High School District continue to decline. So lots of questions as far as that's concerned, but this is going to be at least, having VTA and Fremont Union High School District at Columbia Neighborhood Center to hear some of the complaints and to interact with the students. And then as far as upcoming council meetings, next Tuesday evening, we have a council meeting, and this is the follow-up meeting to establish a pedestrian mall at the 100 block of South Murphy Avenue. So we started this process, several years ago, but and especially under COVID, we did that temporarily. But earlier this year, we declared our intention to make that a pedestrian mall and requiring, and this is somewhat following the Pedestrian Mall Law Act of 1960. And it requires basically a public hearing and all that. But once we did that, this is the second meeting where we'll do the final design considerations, as well as, I think, make it official. But it's a chance to hear from the public as far as that's concerned, and what's happening downtown. Keeping that as a pedestrian mall. So we'll see what council rules as far as that's concerned. And then everyone knows that I love art and adding more art into Sunnyvale. So we'll be actually doing 2 art-related items that evening. One, council will be looking at approving 16 design proposals for the phase 2 of the Great Box cover-up. So this is the utility boxed art program that we started about a year ago. And then we'll actually also be looking at approving the Art Commission to approve select designs for phase 3 of that same program. And then secondly, we'll be looking at the final selection for the icon for Sunnyvale. And this was something that we kicked off last year. It was choosing an icon sculpture for Sunnyvale. So much like San Jose has had the sharks in San Jose, where they have artists basically paint shark sculptures and have them around the city. And you had the hearts in San Francisco. We'll see what Sunnyvale's are. What we decide from what the Art Commission recommendations are, and we'll approve the final icon design and select artists. So it should be interesting from that standpoint. But yeah, we'll that's a next step. So first we need to choose the icon and then authorize that Art Commission to choose those artists. And let's see, and then so that's Tuesday night. And actually, we kick off with several special orders of the day. One to honor our public safety officers. As far as this is our weekly our yearly public safety officers award. So the Department of Public Safety special awards that we have every year. And then actually we'll have 2 special orders of the day. One for Pride Month and one for Jewish Heritage Month. So a busy evening on Tuesday, but then we have an even busier Thursday. So on Thursday we have our all-day budget workshop, and so this is the third of 3 all-day meetings the council has every year, and so this one is related to our budget, and we focus on budget. Our first one is in January, and it's our strategic session, kind of talking about where council is and what our priorities are for the city for the year. Our second one in February is our study issue and budget proposal workshop. And so we do our ranking of our study issues. But this is kind of doing a preliminary look at our budget, which will ultimately be approved in June. Before our budget year starts in July. And, our budget looks pretty good this year. City finances are moving in the right direction, as the impacts of COVID continue to subside. Virtually all of our revenues have returned or are returning to pre-pandemic levels. So that's actually good. The recommended budget totals $607 million across all funds. So that's about $580 million in expenditures and about $26 million in reserves. So, I'm still working my way through the binders. It's a few thousand pages, I think, total that I need to finish reading over the next week. But in general, it's looking fairly positive. What we'll end up doing at that meeting is, figuring out whether or not we fund some of the additional study issues. And then, there's some budget supplements on things that we might do some minor adjustments as far as that's concerned to the budget. But we'll see, where that goes as far as that's concerned. Let me go ahead and get to our weekly questions. If you have a question, add it to the chat and I'll try to get to it. If I can see it, which is always sometimes a Facebook issue. First up, Holly asked, we recently received a new yard trimming cart note with saying we're replacing yard trimming carts as part of a standard maintenance. Our existing cart, and I expect many others, are in perfectly reasonable working order. I would hope that the city of Sunnyvale, and in particular, the Department of Recycling and Waste Management, would be mindful of not creating unnecessary waste. So yeah, if you live south of El Camino, I think most of you have already received a new yard trimming cart over the last week or so. And if you live north of El Camino, you'll be receiving it sometime in the next month or so. But, the carts have a warranty and must be decommissioned once that warranty expires. And, the yard trimming carts have a life use of about roughly 15 years. And so that's the general lifespan of a cart, but by removing them now, we can actually send the carts to a plastic recycling plant where they're melted down and then combined with virgin plastic and then made into brand new carts. Leaving them in the field longer would actually render the plastic completely useless for recycling. And then they would actually have to go to the landfill, and that would actually truly become wasteful material. So the swap allows, warranty procedures and prevents waste from entering the landfill. And I know it's it's like, well, it's still in workable condition, although, as far as our cart is concerned, after about the 15 years, we're seeing, cracks down the side, and a few other things that it's like, okay, I can understand. This is the city doing doing the long-term planning. Part of our budget is looking at a 10-year balanced budget and a 20-year plan, and doing what's right from a city standpoint. So every 15 years, we replace your yard trimmings cart with a new one, and then we basically recycle the old one while it's still in recyclable order. And it's those sorts of things is why we're known as a very well-run city, and happy of all the policies that past councils have put in place to make sure that we still are a well-run city. Holly also asked, what do I do with the old cart? So all you need to do is set your old cart out for service on your normal collection day, and then by the end of the day, a crew will remove it. And yes, you don't need to empty it. You don't need to make sure that it's empty from that standpoint. They will go through, they will dump it, and then they will collect it, and then provide you a new cart. So happy that process is the right process from a city standpoint. Several people asked last week, why was the former social media coordinator wrongfully terminated? So ultimately, council has two direct reports, the city manager and the city attorney, and council in our budget, in our direction, sets policy and also sets service levels. So sets the service levels as far as that's concerned. And we actually have lots of policy in place that council can't interfere with the daily operations of the city. We can talk to the city manager, we can talk to the city, to the chief and some of the directors, but we can't get involved in the daily operations, the hiring, the firing, from that standpoint of the city that's the city manager and the city attorney's efforts to manage their departments and making sure that things are running smoothly. So I did follow up and had some discussions with them, but the chief made decisions, and I have no control as far as that's concerned. Ultimately, that social media position was a casual position, was a part-time position. There was, as opposed to a full-time salaried employee, which has, different kind of constrictions as far as that's concerned. But, and I heard that Ash actually got another job with a PSOA, and so happy to hear that she will still be highlighting all the good that's happening in our city. So happy to see that. Ron asked, any grand opening festival for the new city hall? So yeah, I've been at the city hall has been open for almost 2 months now. There's still lots of work going on internal to city hall. We're trying to there's still lots of things to be fixed. We're still not in the new council chambers. We had a small ribbon cutting at the beginning of April, and that was, but the big event is scheduled for September, when we'll have finished tearing down the old city hall, the city hall annex, the portable buildings, the rabbit hutches across the street, and then we'll have filled in the basements. We'll have re-landscaped all those grounds. We'll open up, the amphitheater and added art. So lots going on as far as that's concerned. But at the September State of the City, we'll have tours. We'll have a much bigger event as far as that's concerned, and especially we'll have the grounds around the area open and additional parking, because some of the parking is closed. A lot of the parking is closed now during construction, and so to bring a lot of people on for tours, even city staff heard some complaints about where they have to park, because we only have about 95 spaces underneath the new city hall. And, between visitors and a few city staff that park below, it's definitely not enough space as far as that's concerned. Gita asked, a tree fell down in Ponderosa Park while we were having an event. What do I do? So for down trees in Sunnyvale, before 4 p.m., you can call 408-730-7506. And then after 4 p.m., or 4 p.m. to 8 a.m., you can call 408-730-7180, the non-emergency number for public safety. And so, ultimately, I think there's been a lot of trees with the heavy winds that we had, and some rains, but mainly the heavy winds. Definitely there are some trees within our community that have some issues, or at least some possibility of having problems that we didn't have previously. And so, yeah, I've seen some limbs fall and, a few trees fall that they're still kind of recovering. So happy to see, this is staff taking care of that. There were lots of branches down or trees leaning that staff is coming through and doing some cleanup work at some of our parks, some of our sidewalk trees, our park strip trees. So, it's a big city, lots of trees. And, I actually was talking to one of the council members from Saratoga, and they're talking about removing lots of trees because of some of the issues of leaning trees and things of that nature. It's like having a big tree canopy is great, but then sometimes some of the ongoing effects is sometimes a question. I don't see any additional questions in the chat, so let me go ahead and wrap up. Thanks for joining me again this week. We still live in uncertain times. New issues come up almost every day, but I want all of you to know that no matter what challenge we face them together. I'm proud of Sunnyvale and how our residents have responded to all the different challenges over the last few years, and just showing their generosity, showing their kindness, showing that, general community goodwill. We have a fantastic city, and it's all because of the people. Your actions and your attitude really do make a difference. Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. We're in this together, and we will get through this together. Thanks for listening. Have a great weekend. Have a fantastic Mother's Day. Goodbye. See ya.